What are crafty Xilonen's biggest pros and cons? That's what I'm here to tell you today. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. The first thing that we have absolutely got to open with is the fact that Xilonen is a crazy buffer. Her skill is able to decrease the elemental res of enemies by an absolutely massive chunk, and if you choose to max out said ability, then her res shred is only 4% less than 4-piece VV. This is a literally bonkers amount of buffing for a character to have within their base kit. We all know how powerful Res Shred is. It's such a strong ability to the point where any animal character that can use 4VV gains some modicum of value simply because they are able to do that. Yeah, Xilonen can just provide it out of her base kit. What's stopping you from using an animal character with 4VV instead? Simple. Remember our good friend, Scroll of the Hero of Cinder City? This set single-handedly turned Kachina from a nothing unit to Navia's absolute best-in-slot Geo partner during 5.0. And as many individuals pointed out, Kachina's kit itself really isn't anything to write home about. All of her fame came from being able to be a cheap Cinder City holder. Now picture Xilonen on that set. She has actual buffing in her kit, and I don't think you need me to tell you that nearly 40% res shred with an unconditional 40% damage bonus is strong. I mean quote-unquote unconditional, as in it doesn't require you to build any EM the way that Kazuha's buff does, for instance. You'll still need Night Soul, but she's a not long character, so that's no big deal. She has plenty of that. Plus, since Xilonen heals, she's able to work with Farina, making her a wonderful fanfare generator. Considering that most highly meta teams feature our beloved Hydro Archon, that means Xilonen will also be able to take part in these very prestigious comps. I haven't even touched on that wild signature weapon of hers. It provides a bunch of def and damage bonus to herself, helping out Xilonen's personal damage, while also providing damage bonus percent to the team. So not only are you getting the Cinder City buffs, but you're also getting more from her signature sword. She's gonna be an absolute buffing machine. With that being said, we already have a buffing king, that being Kazuha. Can Xilonen really stack up against such a meta behemoth? It's tough competition after all. Kazuha is a top 3 meta character in my opinion, perhaps even top 5 at worst. He provides an average of 30% damage bonus if you build enough ER on him, and can give you 40% res shred through 4VV. Yes, he can give you 40% damage bonus with 1000 DM, which many people have been able to do, but most people are only going to be getting 800 to 900 if we account for proper ER. Xilonen provides nearly the same amount of res shred with a maxed out skill, and 40% damage bonus while needing no stats because of Cinder City. And if you pull for her signature, then that's even more damage bonus for you. Kazuha has been good ever since his release. We're entering 5.1, and the guy came out in 1.6, so he is literally over 3 years old, while still being incredible. He has 100% stood the test of time. Now think about Xilonen. Her buffing rivals Kazuha's. Plus, she is able to access even more damage bonus than him with both Cinder City and her Sig combined. Rivaling one of his game's longest running top units is truly nothing to sneeze at. This could only mean that she's also going to be an S tier character upon release, and that she will have an extreme amount of longevity. Her Geo element also means that she can be an excellent buffer in teams where Kazuha cannot be. For example, Navia teams. Speaking of which, Xilonen is going to buff many characters. She is obviously going to be a crazy good support across many great teams, but there are 2 characters in particular that I'd really like to focus on because what this cat does for them is honestly somewhat out of hand. Listen man, I was already pleased with Kachina. She was already an amazing Navia buffer with 4-piece Cinder City, but with Xilonen entering the ring, holy guacamole with a side of cheese. I expect Navia's damage numbers to go from really good to absolutely elite. Don't quote me on this, because the following statement is extremely bold, but I wouldn't be surprised if she became as good as Linny and Arlecchino damage-wise with a Xilonen by her side. This is nothing that surprising to me, as I always felt like she had the potential to become a top-tier DPS, but Hoya was always holding back her potential. Kachina was already a step in the right direction, but Xilonen is a complete and utter breakthrough for the Spina's leader. All that Geo res shred is going to make Navia hit like a freaking truck loaded with bricks. All that Navia would have needed to become a really powerful DPS was like 15 to 20% res shred. But nearly 40? To all of you who pulled Navia back in 4.8, congratulations. You're officially going to completely knock floor 11 and 12's socks off. Specifically those floors because Genshin finally added a floor skip.
I've been waiting for this.
I'd like to remind everyone, remember when we all thought that Neuvillette was gonna get cooked in Notlan? Yeah, not happening, because when the Hydro Dragon started hearing such things, he said, "Settle down," and put on the chef's hat before going, "Silence," and breaking the game. Kachina already formed an insane new team for him. With it, he was already doing numbers high enough to take down Celestia themselves, and the man was thriving in Notlan even after the release of Mualani. So, throw Xilonen onto the end of his team, with all her delicious res shred that stacks with Kazuha's res shred, and oh boy, Neuvillette was already the best DPS in the game, but I don't think that title's being stripped away from him anytime soon. Of course, I do expect plenty of other characters to get a leg up thanks to this Ocelot lady. I thought she was a leopard, but apparently she's an Ocelot. Anyways, point is, I wanted to focus on these two in specific because I believe that the lovely Geo Lady and Hydro Gentleman are gonna yield the most value out of the big cat. C0 Xilonen is already nuts. I think we're all on the same page here, but if you want to start throwing signature weapons and constellations into the mix, oh boy, things were already gnarly, but now? I've already touched on why her own weapon is very nice. More team-wide damage bonus percent along with more solid stats for herself. I don't want to undersell it, of course. Xilonen's R1 is absolutely nuts, like absurdly so. Yet her constellations have to be talked about. Her C1 is nothing crazy. It's good if you have skill issue and want interruption res. Her C2 is what I really want to speak about. Unique buffs for every kind of element. I want to point out the really crazy ones. Hydro buffing HP percent and Geo buffing damage bonus percent. Finally, an HP buffer for Hydro characters that isn't C4 Yelan. C2 is a much more achievable number for more people. Also, remember how I said that Xilonen is going to make Neuvillette break the game? Oh boy, a C2 R1 Xilonen, paired with Farina, Kazuha, and Neuvillette. Pack up everyone, this team is going to destroy the very fabric of Genshin Impact as we know it. Geos is also lovely for Navia teams. Sure, there's already an abundance of damage bonus in the team with Farina plus 4P Cinder City Xilonen, but this is still really strong. I can't wait to test these two out together, as I seriously have very high hopes for the synergy. I will say that abundance of damage bonus is, like, literally quite the abundance. Think about it. Farina, Nighttime Whispers, Cinder City, her own skill, and if you go the high investment route, then there's also Xilonen's Signature and Navia's Verdict, but it's still a solid buff nonetheless. You will still be doing more damage with than without this buff. However, this does make Xilonen C2 better for Navias that are built on Hunters or Nighttime Navias that aren't being played with Farina. Xilonen's potential for long-term Primogem investment is very high. You will most definitely be satisfied with the returns you'll receive. Don't fear if you're a free-to-play. She has a fantastic craftable design just for her. A C0 big cat is still absolutely well worth your time. Yet I think that this cat's high investment potential is absolutely nothing to scoff at. As if her base kit wasn't already nuts enough. Something else that's pretty neat is that she's able to play as a main DPS at C0. This isn't going to be her main playstyle, and yes, her support playstyle is going to be significantly stronger. The reason I think this is cool is because A, I believe she will be a decent enough DPS if you want to make it work, and B, everybody that loves this character has access to on-fielding her, even as a free-to-play. Long-term viewers of mine know how much of a fan I am of Lady Farina. I literally took her all the way to C6 just so that I could turn her into my main DPS. I didn't care what constellation it would be, I only knew that whatever turned Farina into an on-fielder was an absolute must. Much to my wallet's misfortune, that happened to be C6. Then you have Venti, my absolute favorite character in all of Genshin Impact. It doesn't matter how many constellations you get, you cannot turn the guy into an effective main DPS. Sure, I suppose they're C1, but you cannot tell me that C1 Venti is an actually effective main DPS. The point that I'm trying to make here is that people who love this character aren't forced to shell out an absurd amount of cash simply to enjoy their favorite on-field. It really embodies the play who you like mission statement, while also offering a unique new playstyle for people who may eventually become bored of supportive Xilonen. I know that this pro really might not mean anything to a lot of people, but I personally really like what it stands for, and from a gameplay perspective, it means that you're getting a wider package to play around with, offering more fun gameplay opportunities, which I think everyone's gonna have a great time with. I like to say this anytime that I cover the cons of a truly meta unit. These are more or less nitpicks, and you really shouldn't be convinced to not pull for her if you're a meta player just because of the following nitpicks I'm about to mention. Essentially, the pros far outweigh the cons. Yet, these are still considerations worth making. Xilonen doesn't totally replace Kazuha. There are still gonna be teams where you'd rather use the Maple Twink, such as Aggravate, because in that particular case, the extra electro application he provides through his burst procs more aggros, which equals more official A4s, or even International, where you can comfortably double swirl by using Kazuha. His swirl is also able to spread Hydra application even further. When it comes to this game's absolute top meta DPSs, Xilonen will either work together with Kazuha to buff them, or Kazuha will simply remain their best option. Neuvillette, Kazuha and Xilonen work together to create true chaos. Linny, it's literally an either-or situation. However, Twinks stick together, so if you're based, then you're going to use Kazuha. Arlecchino, if you're playing the Elan team, then it's once again an either-or situation. But if you're playing a C2 plus Farina, then you'd prefer to use Kazuha. You will have more than enough damage bonus already, while also benefiting from double swirls. Now, don't get me wrong, even if the rotation is a little more jank, the Cat Lady is still very viable with Arla. It's not some massive adjustment that you have to make rotation-wise, but it is still something worth considering. Remember, the Abyss has two sides, and the Imaginarium Theater has unique seasons. There is absolutely nothing wrong with a second Kazuha. I think that Xilonen will certainly cook the Maple Twink in certain scenarios, but if you take a look at the top DPS units in the game, who are ultimately the most important, Kazuha will still be relevant. This especially applies if you throw Constellations into the mix, as C2 Kazuha's EM is more valuable to a Vape team compared to Xilonen's C2 buffs. Animo is also a much more flexible element than Geo in my opinion, fitting into more scenarios on the whole. I still think that the Big Cat is going to unlock a whole lot of new potential for many different teams. After all, Kachina has proven to be very valuable all because she can use 4-piece Cinder City. Throw Xilonen's Res Shred onto that, add healing for fanfare synergy, and you've got yourself an absolute meta behemoth. But no, I don't think the end of Kazuha's era has come quite yet. This is the greatest nitpick of them all, but an issue of Xilonen is that her burst isn't all that valuable. All it does is heal, therefore making it good for fanfare, but it's pretty obsolete in teams where you already have a healer. Granted, for the nervy Celestia killer team, the healing is very good, but Mr. Settle Down can already self-sustain fanfare by himself because, well, Neuvillette things. Navia teams typically have Bennett or Xianyun within them, and most of our top meta teams will ask for either of those two as well. Of course, I'd rather her healing be there than not be there. Having Farina synergy is always an instant plus to your overall value as a character. It's more so a shame because even more buffs or perhaps even some big personal damage could have impacted that burst of hers. But this really isn't that big of a deal. Any more buffing in her base kit could have straight up made her an unbalanced unit. Just something to consider when team building with her though. This character is nuts. Obviously pull for who you like. You don't quote-unquote need anyone. Take it from me, who doesn't even like this character. This unit is seriously busted, and if you care about meta, then yes, you should 100% pull for her. I absolutely expect Xilonen to become a staple meta unit that will be relevant in top meta discussions for a very, very long time. Navia finally got her true best in slot buffer. Neuvillette is going to break the fabric of reality itself, and I am very hyped for the more in-depth testing that'll be done on her once she comes out. Hoyo really hired a Michelin star chef for this patch. They cooked an amazing character, cooked new QOL, and most importantly, cooked up skippable Abyss floors. Finally, man. In any case, color me impressed of how this character seems to be turning out. Hopefully this video was able to tell you Xilonen's biggest pros and cons. This has been Juice, signing out, and Xilonen's biggest con is that she isn't a cute twink like Kazuha.